Yeah, no problem. Great. Okay, I think I know most of you, but if we don't know each other, I'm Laura Healy-Smith and I'm the Communications Officer for Climate Forth. Our presenter today is my colleague Mirran, Mirran Trimble, who she is our Visitor and Business Engagement Officer. And she's going to be taking you through our first Ask Me Anything session. And these sessions are really, they're just kind of like brief lunch hour learning sessions. Climate Forth is a pilot project, and one of the things that we're being encouraged to do is to share learning and and hopefully it'll be of use to other people. You'll get the good stuff that we've learned and maybe some of the pitfalls that we feel we could have avoided. So yeah, that's the purpose of these sessions. And we are running a series this is our first one. We're going to be running them until I think the end of September or October. So I'll let you know what the other ones are in case you're interested to attend those. So today, as I said, Mirran is going to be taking us through sustainable transport and some of the initiatives that we have been piloting in the Inner Forth today. First of all, just a few housekeeping points. I think I've enabled everyone's camera if they want to switch it on. Let me just check that I've done that. Allowing everyone's camera. Yeah, but you're perfectly fine to keep your cameras off. We are recording this today. We will edit it a little bit and put it on our YouTube channel at some point. If you're not chatting or speaking or asking a question, just stay on mute. And you can use the chat option to interact at any point. And then if you have any questions, shove them in the Q&A section, which is just next to the chat box, and Mirran and I will get to them at the end of the session. I think that is everything. If anyone has any tech problems at any point, just put their hand up. But I think I will hand over to Mirran now and she can take you through today's session.
Brilliant. Thanks, Laura. Hi, everyone. I'm Mirran. I might recognise one or two names, but I think a few of you I haven't met before. So nice to meet everyone and thanks for coming along. I'm going to just share my screen so you can see what we're doing. And hopefully, is that showing up okay? Hopefully everyone can see the slides up there. Fab. So so this is our first Ask Me Anything session and it's going to be about sustainable transport. So I'm going to be talking about our Inner Forth bike bus service. So it's a free seasonal transport service. It's for cyclists and walkers in the Inner Forth. And I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of the first 2 seasons that we've run, what's worked for us, what's been challenging and some of the lessons that we've learned and kind of future recommendations we would have for anyone else running a service like this. We've then got some of the questions that you've sent in beforehand, so I'll go through those at the end. And then if you have any other questions, as Laura said, do just go ahead and pop these in the Q&A kind of section, and then we can answer those at the end as well. So just to start with, I'd like to give you a quick introduction to the Climate Forth project. So I know some of you will probably be a bit familiar with us already. Climate Forth is delivered by the Inner Forth Futures Partnership, which is made up of 9 organisations. So we've got RSPB, Nature Scot, Green Action Trust, Walk Wheel Cycle Trust, Historic Environment Scotland, and then the local council authorities. So we work with Falkirk, Clackmannanshire, Fife and Stirling as well. So Climate Forth is a 3.5-year project. We're now in the final year, so it'll be ending at the end of 2026. And we're funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund, as well as a range of co-funders. We are being delivered across the Inner Forth area, so as I mentioned, Stirling, Falkirk, Clacks, and some of West Fife as well. The map, hopefully you can see on the screen there, shows the area that we work in. So the kind of red solid line is our core engagement area, and the blue dotted line is our wider engagement area where we deliver some of our activities as well. The aim of the project is really to ensure that Inner Forth heritage is valued, and we want to help inspire people to take action to meet Scotland's net zero climate targets. We want to make sure that the natural and built heritage assets in this area have an increased resilience to societal and climatic change, and that people and places of the Inner Forth have increased resilience to change as well, with the idea being that heritage can help support the local economy, healthy lifestyles, sustainable choices and a just transition. As Laura mentioned, it is a pilot project, so we are trying to test and develop lots of different activities to try and understand, what works, what's effective, what would be beneficial to do in the future. And there's going to be lots of kind of shared learning that comes out of this and out of our evaluation. And that's where these Ask Me Anything sessions come in. So this is one of the ways that we're trying to share learning and trying to chat to people as well and answer questions about some of the activities that we're delivering. So the Inner Forth bike bus, this is going to be our kind of topic for today. So some of you may be familiar with it, some of you might not. It's a free transport service. It's for walkers and cyclists, and it's in the Inner Forth area. The aim ultimately is to try and promote and facilitate more sustainable car-free exploration of the Inner Forth heritage and the lovely landscapes that we've got. The bike bus itself, so we've got two vehicles. So each one is a 16-seat minibus, and it's got a trailer attached, and the trailers can take up to 12 bikes on them. The service runs through the summer, so it runs once a week on a Sunday. So in the previous seasons, it's run from April through to October. We are looking at doing hopefully a third season this summer, which will be a slightly shorter one, probably from about the end of May through to end of September. There's 8 stops, so you can see on the map there the stops that we are using. So it starts off in the morning at Port Edgar in South Queensferry. The 2 buses set off at the same time. They do the loop in opposite directions, and then they repeat that again in the afternoon. You can just show up to use the service. You don't have to book, but it is an option. It's kind of worked for us, having that flexibility where people can just use it however they want and show up. Whereas people who are a little bit more concerned about making sure they've got a booking, there's space for them, space for their bike, have that option. The service generally isn't completely full at the moment, so it kind of works being able to show up. It is something to consider if the service does continue to grow and become busier. Bookings might become a little bit more important, but at the moment it's working for us to have that flexibility. And as I mentioned, we've delivered the 2 seasons so far. We are hoping to run a third one this summer. Plans for that are being finalised at the moment. So hopefully very, very soon we'll be able to kind of give exact dates and details of what season 3 is going to look like. And we're taking on board a lot of the learning as well from the first 2 seasons to try and improve our third season. So I'm going to start with what's worked well and what's been really positive for the project. I'd say one thing that has been really, really effective is using influencers, particularly local influencers, to try and promote the service to some of the local audiences. So we've worked with Marcus Stitz. So he's a well-known local cycling influencer. I don't know if he would describe himself as an influencer, but I would definitely say he is. And he's an author as well. He's written lots of really interesting cycle books. And we've also worked with Laura Young, who's known as Less Waste Laura. So she's really popular on social media. She's an environmental and sustainability influencer. So they were 2 really good choices for us to try and kind of spread the word about the bike bus. They both took videos of themselves using the bus and some of the routes they did. And it was really popular, and it was really helpful for people to see how to use the service and to try and understand it a bit better. It is quite a difficult concept, I think, to explain to people. You have to think about how am I actually going to use the service, what route am I going to do, what's my itinerary. So having these videos from the influencers kind of showing what they did with it was really, really helpful. And obviously they've got quite a wide reach as well. And it just makes things a little bit easier. Marcus also did an event for us where he took a group out and they used the bike bus to go and do some cycling, and they went to lots of local cafes and things like that as well, which was really nice. So the pictures you can see are from the event that he did. And that was a really nice way to engage with people and actually take them out and say, look, we're just going to show you how to use the service. And that was really, really positive. We do have the 2 videos as well that the influencers made for us. So we could share these in a follow-up email so you can have a look as well at what they produced. Another thing that was really effective was the fact that we could take 12 bikes, which I think probably doesn't sound all that crazy, but actually there's not really many services that do what the bike bus does, being able to transport bikes as well. And a lot of the services that are out there, they can only take a couple of bikes, and it's usually kind of shared spaces with wheelchair users that would take priority. So it's not always guaranteed you're going to have space. And actually being able to have 12 spaces just for bikes is actually quite unique. and it's great for groups in particular who might want to cycle together, where otherwise there wouldn't be a public transport option for them to kind of get to a new location and cycle and then come back. So it's definitely been a really big positive. Not to say the trailers don't have their issues as well. They are difficult to maneuver and they're not perfect, but they have been really good. We've also had really good feedback from passengers. Now, we haven't had loads of feedback, and this is something I'll talk about a little bit later on. But actually, the feedback that we have had has been really, really positive, and I'll talk about that a bit in the next slide. We've had really good numbers as well. They've increased a lot over the 2 seasons, and we've actually had, according to the drivers, we've got between sort of 10 to 15 regular passengers who are using, certainly in season 2, we're using the service most weeks, which I think is really, really positive to show that actually it is doing what we want it to do. It is valuable to people, and people are coming back to use it. So I think that's really nice. And we've had quite a few people in the past couple of months get in touch as well, saying, you know, we've used the service before, we really want to use it again, you know, is there going to be a 3rd season and stuff like that. So yeah, really, really nice sign that we are doing something right. So just to go into kind of the passengers a little bit more, you can see on the side there some of the feedback that we've had, and the passenger numbers are there as well. So across the 2 seasons, we've had 394 passengers use the service. Season 1, we had 126, and then you can see in season 2, that's more than doubled to 268. So definitely a case of building that momentum and kind of increasing familiarity with the project. As I mentioned, the influencers were really good, and you can see there the kind of average number of passengers each week before the influencers and after. So it has obviously gone up, and that's been really great. Although it's important to remember that actually there were lots of promotion going on across both seasons, and it's not, you can never kind of put it all on one factor, although it was helpful. There's lots of stuff going out through all our social media channels, lots of articles, we're on the radio, lots of promotion through partners as well and things like that. So yeah, as I say, it's all about kind of building that momentum, and it's great to see, and hopefully in season 3 we'll see those numbers going up even more. And then feedback, as I say, really positive. I should be really clear, we have not received a lot of feedback. So this has been a key issue for us, not being able to get kind of consistent feedback from passengers, but what we have received has been great. So we've had people talking about how they've been able to explore new parts of the Inner Forth that they haven't been to before, or that they would struggle to access by themselves. I've had cyclists as well talking about how, you know, they've been able to cycle out to further points than they would otherwise be able to reach, and then they can just cycle back, or they can do parts of the Inner Forth loop that were otherwise going to be quite tricky for them to get to, especially without driving. So lots of really positive feedback showing that we are achieving what we set out to achieve, and actually quite a lot of positive feedback about the drivers as well, which is really nice, about the drivers being really helpful and being really kind. And something that I found quite interesting is that pretty much all the feedback we did receive does mention the drivers, whether it's good or bad, and most of it is good, which I think does highlight that that's actually quite an important factor for people. That kind of customer experience or passenger experience with the staff on the bus is something that people care about, because everyone is kind of reporting on it. So that's quite useful to know. So moving on to the challenges, of course, there are challenges that we faced along the way. So one issue was trying to identify suitable stops for the bike bus to use. This was really tough. It took quite a long time to agree permissions and things like that. It's difficult trying to kind of coordinate, especially with existing buses in use. So that's partly why we ended up running the service on a Sunday, because there's obviously less public transport running, so there's a little bit more flexibility with where we can stop. But the other issue is that the stops have to be accessible for the minibuses with the trailers. You know, they need the space to turn, they need the space to access. And this did rule out quite a lot of options for us. It's difficult because you want to try and reach some of those smaller rural communities that lack some of that existing infrastructure. You want to provide a service for people who otherwise would probably have to drive everywhere. But there is also a reason why public transport isn't already reaching those places, which is that it is difficult to access. So that is quite limiting, especially with a vehicle like ours. If you can't maneuver around, then it's not going to work. So that was definitely something that we had to think about. We also had to think about how long to actually stop at each stop, because of the time it takes to load the bikes. loading the bikes is quite slow, and it's really hard to judge how long you're going to need, because we have to set a timetable with sort of specific timings that we need to stick to. And if you get to a stop and there's one bike to load, great, it's really quick and easy. But if there's 10 bikes, it's going to take you quite a long time, especially with just the one driver doing all the loading. It's quite difficult. And one thing we did hear from passengers in season 1 was that they were quite frustrated having to stop for a long period of time when there's no one getting on or off the bus. And that actually it was just taking too long to get to where they wanted to go. So we did find a bit of a middle ground with it, where we've kind of the busiest stops have got a 10-minute stop time, and the kind of quieter ones have 5-minute stop time. And we did reduce the number of stops as well after the first season to try and kind of minimize this. It does seem to be working just now, but obviously if the service gets busier, it might need to be tweaked again. It's a difficult one to judge, to be honest, and I think it's one that takes a bit of trial and error. But yeah, so far it seems to be working. So the next point is about the limited days. So we only run the service on a Sunday. It does mean that it's not super visible, and if we were to run it on more days of the week, it would start to self-promote a bit more, because people are seeing it, it's becoming much more familiar. And also, you know, if there's people who work Sundays or who can't use it on a Sunday, it does kind of exclude them from using the service. So that's definitely been a bit of a challenge. Similarly, there's an element of lack of visibility with the branding. So the vehicles aren't owned by us, and they do get used for other things, which means we can't sort of cover them in all our branding as we might like. We do have like the magnetic branding on them for the bike bus. But yeah, it's definitely, I think if you owned the vehicles and they were kind of being used exclusively for that project, there would definitely be a lot of value in that, in terms of increasing your visibility and how much people are kind of aware of you. We did also have some challenges with the service provider, particularly early on. There's issues with things like the booking system, delays and issues with the timetable, and sometimes inconsistency with drivers as well. There's lots of different drivers coming in who might be unfamiliar with the route. That could be a bit of a challenge. Definitely with a service like this that is a bit more unusual, it's not your sort of typical transport provider service, I think it's inevitable you're going to have challenges, especially at the beginning. And I think you really do have to remember to have good communication and good training at the beginning, lots of ongoing monitoring and making sure that any issues are being addressed quite quickly, which is things that we've done, but definitely something to kind of keep in mind, that it can be a challenge. I suspect also we have asked maybe too much of the drivers at times, because we only have that one member of staff on each vehicle, and they have to obviously drive and make sure they're sticking to the timetable and the route. They're responsible for kind of loading and unloading all the bikes, as well as distributing all our leaflets and feedback, you know, engaging with passengers, managing the booking system. There's lots for that one person to do, and I think that increases the risk of these issues happening. So I will talk about this a little bit more in the next slide, where we look at our kind of future recommendations, but this is something we're looking to address with a kind of second member of staff on the bus for our next season, just to try and manage that workload a little bit. So the next point on here is about understanding the concept. So again, I think it's really difficult with something like this, especially when it is quite unique, to actually be able to explain the concept to people in a way that they can understand really quickly and really easily. And, you know, the more you have to kind of explain something to someone, the more they're going to be like, it's not worth the time. You know, you want people to know exactly how to use it, sort of what sorts of things they can do. And yeah, it's the more time they have to plan, the harder it is. So definitely kind of from the get-go, trying to make it really clear what the service offers. And I think again, what things I've talked about with the influencers and the videos, having those visuals to kind of help people get what the Inner Forth bike bus is, what it does, how they can use it, is really useful. So definitely that was something that I think was difficult. And as it grows and people become more familiar with it and kind of word of mouth increases, then that becomes less of an issue as well. And then the last point, as I mentioned, lack of feedback. We really got very little feedback from passengers. So, and I think this probably also wasn't really something we necessarily thought was going to be one of the bigger challenges, but it does make it difficult for the evaluation and for trying to sort of work out how to improve the service. So it's definitely something we'll be prioritising in our next season. So on to our lessons and recommendations. So There's lots of lessons that we've learned from the first 2 seasons. We are in the process of doing an evaluation as well for those first 2 seasons. So this is something that we can share soon as well, which will have lots of detail for kind of all the things that we've learned. What I will say is that a good service provider is really essential if you want to deliver a good service. It's worth thinking about what provider you need as well. So obviously you need a transport operator, but one thing we're going to be doing in our next season is bringing in a tour company, and they're going to provide a tour guide for each bus. And this is really about improving the passenger experience, and also trying to attract more tourists as well to use the service. So the tour guide will be there to engage with passengers. They're going to share recommendations and sort of local knowledge. They'll be able to talk about the project in more detail as well. They can manage the booking system. They can really prioritise that feedback, make sure that's being completed and collected. It's also helpful having someone, if you are at really busy stops, having 2 people who can help loading bikes as well, things like that. It just keeps everything a little bit ticking over better. You can stick to the timetable a bit better and take some of that pressure off the driver. So I think this hopefully will be something, well, obviously once we finish the 3rd season, we'll be able to evaluate the effectiveness of that as well. But I think think about having the right people on the bus to provide the best experience, and having more than one person is really valuable, and hopefully we'll see the benefits of that. I also can't kind of overstate how important it is to have lots and lots of time to set up something like this. It does take time, especially things like kind of finalising the timetable. It's a slow process trying to agree stops with landowners, trying to work out how the timetable is going to work, how the route is going to work, testing that with the service provider as well and with the landowners. It all takes a lot of time. You also want to be kind of going through procurement really far in advance if you can, because the best companies, they book up well in advance. So if you want lots of people sort of tendering for providing the service, you want to give it as much time as you can, really. Also making it easy to use. So again, I've kind of touched on this a bit already, but you want to make it so easy for people to understand the service, how they use it. They don't have to think about their journey in advance. They don't have to figure out the timetable, figure out a route. If you can share videos or something saying, here's a route you can do, here's a day trip you can do, and here's exactly how it works, it just makes it so much easier for them to use. And that's where the local influencers come in as well, being able to kind of produce that kind of content. It's really valuable, and definitely something that we're going to look to do more of in this upcoming season. Another thing to do would be to increase how often the service runs. So I've talked about how we are limited to just Sundays. If you can add those extra days in, it really would benefit visibility. It helps the service self-promote. And again, if you can own your own vehicles, ideal as well, so you can really maximise your branding. This isn't something we're going to have scope to do for our season 3, but certainly for a project like this, that would be a kind of longer term goal, was to try and run it more regularly if we can. And lastly, collecting more feedback, which is probably an obvious one after kind of everything that I've talked about. But yes, this is something we're going to be doing more of in the next season. And we're also going to be collecting more detail, making sure we've kind of got as much information as we can to really evaluate the project, and making sure that that's the priority. So those are our kind of key lessons and recommendations. Next, so what's next for the Inner Forth Bike Bus? So as I mentioned, we're running season 3, which will hopefully be running from the end of May till about the end of September. After that, we will be completing a kind of final evaluation, which is going to be much more in-depth, kind of look at how the service is run and what works and what doesn't work. And we also will have the kind of the shorter evaluation of the first 2 seasons, which will be going out in the next few weeks as well, as a kind of stepping stone towards the final one. After that, we don't know what's going to happen with the bike bus, to be honest. In an ideal world, we would love for someone to keep it going. If another project or organisation wanted to take over, that would be great. There's also the possibility that once Climate Forth comes to an end, that the Inner Forth Futures partners might decide to do another project that might include the bike bus or some format of it. At the moment, this is all very much an unknown, but it is something that we're going to be exploring in the coming months, into sort of what's the legacy going to be, how is there a way that we can continue the bike bus in some way, continue learning from it, and yeah, so hopefully later in the project we'll know a little bit more about what's going to be next. So that kind of brings me to the end of all the things that I wanted to talk about today. we're going to move on to questions. So to start with, we did have a few questions sent in, so thank you very much for sending these through. So I'll run through these first, and then if you've got any other questions, do pop them in the Q&A, and then we'll come to those afterwards. So the first question we've got here is, what are the main challenges you faced during the first season, and how did you use learning from there to improve the service for the following season? Or did you implement changes during the first season itself? So to answer this, there were a few challenges, certainly, and teething issues kind of early on. One of the issues was low passenger numbers. And, you know, certainly the first few services, there were often sort of only 1 or 2 people using it each week. So with that, it's just about that consistent promotion. As I said, the influencers were really helpful for that as well, for getting numbers up, and just making sure that we're talking about this as much as possible and getting that word out there to kind of increase those numbers. There was also difficulty explaining the concept and sort of just getting people on board. You know, we had radio ads going out. There was lots of obviously social media stuff like that to start with, but we were still getting those really low passenger numbers. So I think trying to just really concisely explain what the bike bus is, why you should use it, how you can use it, and again, having lots of visual aids for that, having the videos, having the influencers, stuff like that, would help with those original challenges. The stops as well were a big challenge, and obviously I talked about trying to sort of identify permissions and things like that, and find stops that are accessible was all really difficult. We also found during the first season that some of the stops just weren't really being used or were more difficult to access, and just weren't really working, so we did change them. So we had 11 stops in the first season, and we dropped that down to 8 stops in the second season. So for example, one of the ones that we dropped was Dunfermline train station, because it wasn't being used, and what we then discovered was that there weren't actually any trains running on a Sunday morning, which meant, you know, we wanted to have it there as a transport hub so people could use public transport to get to the bike bus. It doesn't work if there's no trains running. So that one wasn't really working, so we took that one out. So there was a bit of kind of tweaking the stops and things like that. We also had some issues with some of our promotional materials and our feedback and things like that not really being shared to people. And as I talked about, I think when you've only got one driver sort of doing everything, you know, their priority is driving and the timetable and health and safety and all those other things, making sure the bikes are all loaded. Their priority isn't handing out our kind of project information to the same extent. So one thing we did was we just kind of condensed it all into one little sheet which had all the information about the project and things like that. So that was quite helpful, just reducing how much needed to be handed out. And again, the third season, having the tour guide, I think will be really beneficial for this. The last challenge, really, I think the big one was about the stop time. So we did get that feedback from passengers saying, you know, the stops are too long. You know, if you're trying to get somewhere, it's frustrating sitting at lots of stops, especially if they're not really being used by lots of people, but you still have to sit there for 10 minutes. So as I mentioned, we tried this hybrid approach of having 5-minute stops for the quieter locations and 10-minute stops for the busier ones, and that seems to be working. And again, cutting down from 11 stops to 8 reduces how much sort of waiting time there is. So that seems to have helped with that as well. But as I say, it's kind of an ongoing thing that needs to be monitored. So for question 2, what has been the profile of the people using the transport? Is it organised cycle groups, individuals, walkers, etc.? So unfortunately, because we don't have a lot of data, a lot of feedback, we don't know too much about this. The information we do have has come from the drivers, so that's been quite helpful. And what we've kind of heard from them is, certainly we know there's been a couple of organised cycle groups who have used the service for day trips and things like that, which is really good. Local people are using it for sure, and of those kind of 10 to 15 regulars I mentioned, they're predominantly retired individuals from the local community. We've had the occasional family group as well, although they don't seem to be returning. That's definitely something to look at, and I think hopefully the tour guide as well would just give that a little bit more kind of passenger kind of enhanced passenger experience that might encourage families to come back, especially things like being able to provide information on local facilities or cafes or things that the kids can do, and being able to kind of just give that little bit extra might help with that. And we do know that we've had very few tourists using the service as well. So again, that's another group we want to be promoting to more this year. And again, the tour guide will hopefully help with that. I don't know the split between sort of cyclists and walkers. I do know that we've had both. Again, speaking to the drivers, we know it is a mix, but unfortunately, I don't have the data to kind of say exactly how many of each. So question 3, how have the number of users been? So I mentioned this a wee bit earlier as well. They've been good. We've gone from 126 in season 1 to 268 in season 2. So that's been really great, and have had just under 400 passengers in total. So hopefully we'll see that keep going up in season 3. So question 4 is, have people with non-standard bikes used it, and did it meet their needs? So yeah, this is something we have offered as, if you have a non-standard bike, you can bring it, but just to let the drivers know in advance so they can kind of make sure they know what they're doing. Again, there's not a lot of data on it, but speaking to passengers and speaking to drivers, we do know there have been some non-standard bikes used on the bike bus, particularly bigger bikes that are maybe a bit more awkward, and it's been totally fine. It's worked, they've been able to be secured safely and not had any issues with that. The only thing really on that is that they, certainly ones that we've used, they have taken up more space. So it does reduce the bike capacity of the trailer itself. Something to bear in mind, I suppose, could be an issue down the road, but at the moment, with our kind of current numbers, it's not been an issue. It's quite unusual that the bike trailer is at capacity at any one time. So that seems to be working fine. Question 5 is, what do you wish had been done differently from the very start? So hindsight's always 2020. I think there's a couple of things that we could do sort of from the beginning to kind of set things up. So one is always going to be allocate more time. This might not be a realistic one, but definitely giving more time to plan everything out, get the stops, get the timetable sorted, get the right service providers, promote the service as well really clearly, get those influencers on board from the very start. We started kind of planning for the project 8 months before the first kind of delivery started. And I would say at least a year ideally would be better. But the more time you can give it, the better, to really give it a strong start for sure. Also, I think maybe thinking about other ways to promote it to the service provider. We have struggled with not really getting much response from service providers who actually want to run the service. And I think part of that might be because it's a difficult concept to get to grips with early on, as I know I've mentioned this quite a few times today. But that's for the transport operator as well as for the passengers. And it's tough when it's a new project, you haven't really done it before, it's different from other systems, but I think trying to find some way to kind of visualize and conceptualize what the bike bus is and what it does might be helpful for kind of getting to other people and really showing them that this is what we're trying to achieve, and that might attract more service providers as well. So yeah, it's a tricky one for sure. I definitely say have 2 staff in each vehicle from the get-go to make sure all those jobs that we need doing are getting done, and ideally one of them being like an actual qualified tour guide. And as I say, this is what we're trying for the next season, and hopefully we'll see some benefits from that. And again, yes, the influencers and promotional videos I've mentioned, kind of getting those going straight away. And if there's time, also maybe trying to find more opportunities for collaboration. So for example, working with bike hire companies or any other organization that might have kind of overlapping audience that, they're already established, they're already reaching people, are the ways you can work together for mutual promotion or for collaboration. Yeah, for example, bike hire companies is a great one because, if people want to use a bike bus, if tourists are coming over, they want to use a bike bus, but they don't have a bike with them, having those kind of partnerships set up where people can hire a bike from here and then use the service would be ideal. So again, it's something that it requires a bit more time and planning and things like that, but that would be a nice thing to consider. And then for question 6, it is, has there been interest from users or suppliers to keep running the service once the project ends? So yes, good question. There's definitely been interest from the current transport operator who runs the service in seeing this continued, and we have had interest from passengers about seeing it continued as well. as I mentioned, we've had quite a few people recently getting in touch saying, you know, we're really hoping there's going to be a third season. We really enjoy it. We really enjoy being able to go out and using it, and there's lots of benefits for the service. So that kind of feedback from passengers is really promising, that it is valued and it could be continued. At the moment, we don't have any projects kind of expressing an interest to take it on. But obviously, we are still running. We've still got a third season to do and evaluation. So we're hoping after season 3, we'll have lots more feedback. We'll have a lot of data really clearly showing the benefits and kind of the evidence of that, with the hope that that might encourage more people to take it on. So that's the end of those questions. I think at this point, we can hop over to the Q&A. And Laura, do you want to let me know if there's any questions coming through there?
Yeah, we've had one from Roddy from Falkirk Council, and he is asking, when you say you don't own the vehicle, does that include the trailers? And he's asking because he would be interested to gauge scope for using these outside of the bike bus season.
Yeah, so the minibuses are owned by our transport operator. The trailers themselves are owned by the RSPB. So this is all that the only thing that we're using them for at the moment.
So they would potentially, yeah, they're not being used out with the bike bus season at the moment.
No.
Yeah. So that's maybe worth a conversation then between yourself and Roddy at some point, just to see if that would be a possibility. I've actually got a question. Well, it's not so much a question, it's just something that came up quite a lot when we were sort of developing the bike bus and when we were planning the route. And a lot of people asked, why do you not have a stop in Stirling? And it was, yeah, I guess, like, do you have any reflections on that, Mirran? And Helen, who's on the webinar today as well, she actually started off working with us on the project and was involved in a lot of the earlier discussions about where the bike bus should go. Like, how did we decide to kind of do the route that we decided to, that we've ended up with today, basically?
Yeah, so I think with Stirling, one of the issues that was quite tricky is that there is just finding stops. And I think that was the issue with a lot of places. So I think also because there is a lot more public transport in Stirling, so trying to coordinate bringing in the Inner Forth bike bus alongside existing bus services and things is quite tricky to manage. And as I say, that's partly why we did it on a Sunday, where it's a bit easier, but certainly in Stirling, where it is out of all the areas, it is busier and there's a lot more going on. I think that was quite challenging. And I think that really did dictate quite a lot of the stops was, you know, how is it going to fit in with other public transport routes, as well as obviously the accessibility issues. But if anyone else has other thoughts, feel free to jump in as well.
Yeah, I suppose as well it was, I think Helen would probably have some thoughts on that. So yeah, Helen, feel free to come in.
If you're happy with me sharing. Yes, so the area is really big. And in terms of travel time, somebody who wanted to get from, let's say, North Queens Ferry all the way, well, I don't know, like the opposite sides, it would take a long time. So the whole area of the Inner Forth couldn't really, well, we made a decision that it wouldn't be covered completely. And because, as Mirran said, Stirling had a lot of good transport services, the decision was made to focus mainly on the other side of the area. But I guess depending on demand, that could have been interesting. And then the issue of with the trailer, it's not a public transport service, and so that we can't use standard bus stops, and so in a city just makes it harder.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, we wanted the bike bus to open up the lesser known heritage of the area, and certainly, you know, like in terms of the sort of hidden heritage gems rather than, you know, the ones that people automatically go to. And yeah, we do have stops at the Helix and Kelpies, but we have other stops at lesser known heritage sites as well, which is, that was the whole kind of point of the service as well. I think that's a nice thing to highlight as well. And just as from a comms perspective, totally just everything that Mirran said, something that I would probably have done differently other than having more time, because obviously the Inner Forth bike bus is one of many, 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 many Climate Forth activities that we're all working on. But if you had that time and that sort of the time and scope to commit 100% to it, you could do things very differently. And I think the most important thing that I've learned is that videos are really key to people's understanding. They are what gets you engagement on Instagram, Facebook, even on LinkedIn as well, and just like making it easy for people, having a how-to guide, how to take the Inner Forth bike bus. I think that was one of our videos. So I wish that I'd kind of done that a little bit differently from the start, but I feel like we've got there through trial and error, which is the whole point of Climate Forth, really, and the piloting approach.
Yeah,
I don't think there's any other questions, but if anyone wants to come off mute and ask anything, or just any comments at all, feel free to do that, or I'll give you a wee minute if you want to type anything in the chat. Then feel free. We are also going to be running, like I said at the start, we're going to be running some other sessions over the coming months. So yeah, Mirran has popped them up there. Very varied, just like Climate Forth. So there's a lot of different sessions that are coming up. So I can keep you posted on when we're doing those. And yeah, if anyone is interested in, I guess the whole point is if anyone is interested in running a similar service, then we would be happy to have discussions with you after today, wouldn't we, Mirran?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
it'd be great to see.
Yeah.
Okay, if we're out of questions, what I'll do is I'll just do a quick thank you for everyone and just flag some of our funders as well. So I kind of mentioned earlier, we are funded by National Lottery Heritage Fund, and just want to say a big thank you to lottery players as well as all our co-funders who are on here, and our partners as well. Also want to flag some of the fantastic pictures we've had on the slide from RSPB and This Way Up Media, but also from Marcus Stitz. And I think actually pretty much all of the photos on here today are from Marcus and all of the brilliant routes and things he's done for us. So a big thank you to him for those fantastic photos. If you do as well want to keep an eye on things we've got coming up, and some of those other Ask Me Anything sessions, do keep an eye on our social media. We're at Inner Forth on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Laura, correct me if I've missed any, and our website is on there as well. We can send you this all as well in a follow-up email, but do keep an eye out for other things that we've got going on. And thank you very much for everyone coming along as well and listening. I'll stop sharing my screen here.
Yeah.
And just see if there's any other final questions before we wrap up.
I had a little message from Catherine Wilson. She said it was really interesting. Thanks. Yeah, and I will send out some links for you to watch. We've got some videos, some content, so I can send out some links as examples of the things that worked for us that Mirran spoke about earlier. But yeah, a few more people typing, so we'll just let them type away.
Can I just chip in with a quick question?
Yeah, of course.
Obviously, I don't know how good my internet is. Sorry, I'm having to hotspot at the moment. How did you go about kind of getting your influencers on board, and kind of in particular the cycle tour guide? Did kind of you approach him, he approach you? Kind of how are the itineraries kind of planned and things like that?
You want me to answer that one, Mirran?
That might be one for you, yeah.
Yeah. Really, so Marcus, for instance, Helen, who previously worked on the project, she had linked me up with Marcus for another activity. And we just really got in touch, just emailed him and said, listen, we are looking to we're looking to kind of publicize this service. Would you be interested? And it just so happened that he was extremely excited about it. He had used the route, the loop of the bike bus to train for a round the world cycle that he had done years ago. So he had this personal connection to the area, and he was just on board and really keen to help out from the beginning. And then with Laura Anderson, Less Waste Laura, I had followed her on social media, I think on Instagram. And we just thought that she's kind of into sustainability, she's an environmentalist. We just thought that her audience would be a really good fit for who we were trying to reach as well, about active transport and active travel and sustainability. Again, we just got in touch with her through email, and she was super keen to help us as well. So I think it is just not, like just approaching these people and just thinking that they're going to help you, because I think mostly these kind of people are up for helping. And obviously there are sometimes fees attached, but sometimes they may want to just do it because it's something that matters a lot to them. So I think it's about getting the right influencer for whatever you're trying to advertise, really, if that helps.
Yeah. Is it the sort of ride that they would normally do, or was it kind of a distinct one that they'd done in order to then link in with using the bike bus?
And I think so. Marcus had already done lots of stuff around the inner Forth. Laura had never done she'd never done that kind of loop, but she made a really lovely video about her day out. And what she was able to see on the day. So yeah, I think she learned like new things, and she went to places she'd never been before. So that was the angle of her video. Whereas Marcus, he had used that as a training ground, really, around the inner Forth area as a training ground. So he was already familiar with it, and had that kind of connection. So yeah, two different stories, but all with the same kind of result, really.
Yeah, thank you.
No problem. Anyone else got anything they want to come in on? Well, if there's anything after today, feel free to get in touch. I think we've got all your details. You've got our details. Yeah, thank you so much for being here, and we hope to see you at a future session. We will send you out all the details of the upcoming Ask Me Anything sessions, won't we, Mirran?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but thank you so much for being here, and yeah, appreciate you giving up your time to join us today. Thanks a lot.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks.
Cheers. Bye bye.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.